All right, welcome to today's Explainer. We are going to tackle a subject today that, honestly, often feels like pure magic, but as we'll see, is actually a highly practical skill. We're diving into John Adair's fantastic book, The Art of Creative Thinking. And together, we're going to prove that creativity isn't some mystical gift bestowed upon a lucky few. It's actually a structured habit that every single one of us can develop. So, let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. When we think about creating a physical object, say, crafting something out of wood or the graphite in a pencil, we immediately understand that we need raw materials to shape it, right? Well, creative thinking works the exact same way. Ideas don't just magically appear out of a vacuum. Just like making a physical pencil, your creative ideas absolutely require a steady supply of raw materials in order to be shaped and molded into something new and valuable. To make sense of this broad subject, we're going to organize our journey today into 4 clear, logical steps. First, we'll focus on demystifying creative thinking. Second, fueling your imagination. Third, tapping into the power of the depth mind. And finally, navigating the creative process itself.
Let's start with Section 1, Demystifying Creative Thinking. Let's completely shatter this illusion that creativity means pulling ideas out of thin air.
So where do new ideas actually come from? Seriously, how many times have you sat down at a desk, stared at a completely blank page or a blinking cursor, and just waited for the magic to happen? It is incredibly frustrating, right? That's mostly because we mistakenly believe we have to create from absolute zero. But the truth is, everything starts with what already exists. The entire universe of ideas is already here. Our job is just to reassemble it.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the famous sculptor Auguste Rodin perfectly captured this exact mindset. He said, "I invent nothing, I rediscover." And he wasn't alone. Even the great industrialist Henry Ford believed that every person starts with all the essence and substance there is. Creation isn't about conjuring something out of the void. It's simply the act of making new, unexpected connections between existing elements.
Let me give you a brilliant example of how these connections are made using analogies. The engineer Soichiro Honda was building his first 4-cylinder motorcycle, but the design was coming out squat and ugly. He just couldn't figure out how to fix it. So he took a break in Kyoto. While he was sitting in a temple, he found himself utterly fascinated by the face of a Buddha statue. And in this amazing, surprising leap of logic, he recognized a direct analogy between the harmonious beauty of the Buddha's face and how the front of his motorcycle should look. He borrowed that core principle of design and applied it to a completely different field. Now, making these connections often requires a total shift in perspective. When primitive natives in New Guinea first saw an airplane, they called it a big bird. They used what was familiar to understand what was strange. But as creative thinkers, we actually have to do the exact opposite. We must make the familiar strange. We get so used to our daily routines that we literally stop thinking about them. Looking at our everyday world as an unknown mystery is a necessary technique to spark fresh, new thoughts.
Moving on to Section 2, Fueling Your Imagination. This is all about the daily, practical habits required to gather the raw materials your mind needs.
There are 4 absolutely essential habits for gathering creative input. First, you've got to read widely to absorb totally different perspectives. Second, listen. And I mean really listen. The media mogul Lord Roy Thompson was famous for his brilliant listening skills. He was always relentlessly curious to learn from anyone he met. Third, observe carefully. Think Sherlock Holmes here. It's not just about passively seeing, it's about actively analyzing your environment. And finally, keep a notebook. Great minds, from Charles Darwin to the composer Hector Berlioz, kept notebooks right by their beds to capture those fleeting, brilliant ideas before they vanish.
When you adopt these habits, you invite a really wonderful concept into your life, serendipity. This word was originally coined from an old fairy tale about the 3 princes of Serendip, who were basically always making accidental, delightful discoveries of things they weren't even looking for. To practice serendipity yourself, you need a wide span of attention. You have to be open-minded enough to notice the seemingly irrelevant details around you, because those are often the exact missing puzzle pieces to your greatest ideas.
But here's the thing. Serendipity isn't just blind luck. As Louis Pasteur noted, chance favors only the prepared mind. Take the incredible story of Sir Alistair Pilkington. He was standing at his kitchen sink, literally just washing dishes, hardly where you'd expect a massive revelation.
But as he noticed how the water and the soap interacted, that mundane chore sparked a billion-dollar idea for the float glass manufacturing process. His mind was prepared, actively seeking a solution, so when chance presented a visual analogy right there at the sink, he was ready to seize it.
Which brings us to Section 3, the power of the depth mind. Let's look at how your subconscious synthesizes all that raw material we just talked about.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core concept of the book. Think of your mind like a giant submarine in the ocean. The conscious mind is everything happening up above the water. But what Adair calls the depth mind operates deep, deep beneath the surface. It is constantly, quietly analyzing, synthesizing, and valuing all those gathered raw materials. It does the incredibly heavy lifting deep underwater before finally surfacing with a cohesive, brilliant idea. The author C.S. Forrester had this wonderful, vivid metaphor for it. He compared his creative mind to a jellyfish drifting in the ocean. He would just drift, and his subconscious would naturally catch casual phrases, tiny incidents, or interesting observations, like little food particles. Then, without him consciously trying to do anything, those particles would sink into his mind, slowly grow, and eventually surface years later as the brilliant plots for his famous novels. Because this depth mind operates completely unconsciously, one of the best things you can do is literally sleep on a problem. Get this. The inventor of the Singer sewing machine was completely stuck on how to design the needle. One night, he had a dream that he was being chased by natives with spears, and he noticed that every single spear had a hole near its tip. He woke up, immediately realized the eye of the needle needed to be near the point, and boom, the problem was solved. It turns out, even a terrifying nightmare can be highly productive if your depth mind is on the clock.
Finally, Section 4, Navigating the Creative Process. Let's talk about managing the friction and successfully executing these subconscious ideas.
Let's move to and see how this builds into a structured, actionable framework. Graham Wallace proposed 4 clear phases of thought. First up is preparation, where you intensely analyze the problem and gather your data. Second is incubation, where you step back and let that deft mind take over. Third is illumination, that sudden flash of insight or the famous aha moment. And fourth is verification, where you bring the idea back to the conscious mind to critically test and refine it. It is a fantastic roadmap for turning pure chaos into finished products.
During that crucial incubation phase, your golden rule is to drift, wait, and obey. You literally have to step away from the desk. James Watt struggled for 2 solid years trying to improve the steam engine's efficiency, and he didn't find the answer by just staring harder at his blueprints. The massive breakthrough for his steam engine condenser came to him on a beautiful Sunday afternoon while he was just taking a casual walk. When your conscious mind is in neutral, your deep mind shifts into high gear.
But as those ideas start to surface, you must remember this absolutely critical rule: suspend your judgment. Premature criticism acts exactly like a harsh frost, killing off delicate spring seeds. If you judge an idea the second it pops into your head, you will destroy it before it has a chance to grow. You have to let ideas rush in pell-mell completely freely. Just get them down on paper. You can always analyze and verify them later during step 4.
So, the crucial point is you must learn to tolerate ambiguity. Creativity is definitely not a straight, brightly lit path. The great American pioneer Daniel Boone famously said he was never lost, but he was bewildered for 3 days. The poet John Keats called this negative capability, which is just the ability to endure uncertainty, mysteries, and doubts without anxiously reaching for immediate facts. Enduring that uncomfortable feeling of the unknown is absolutely essential to finding something truly original.
To create, Albert Einstein told us, we have to outgrow the prejudices of our environment. So I'm going to leave you with a challenge. Go out today, gather your raw materials, and ask yourself, what familiar thing in my life will I choose to look at as strange today? The answer to that question might just be your next great breakthrough. Thanks for joining this explainer, and keep exploring.